To the Awakened Parent. Thank you so much, Eric, for joining us today.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Eric is parent coach, a writer, speaker, and advocate for peaceful, non-punitive parenting. He helps parents learn to engage with their children in non-violent, non-coercive, and replacing spanking, punishments, and shaming with connection, mindfulness, gentle guidance, and creating safety in the relationship. His mission is to help families everywhere establish emotional, psychological, and spiritual well-being, starting with each parent honouring the intention that all parents have to provide the best they can for their children, and then doing two things: learn and practice the principles of non-punitive parenting and go within to find their own healing.
Yes.
Okay. So our group, the Awakened Parenting Community, has, we put the call out yesterday for some questions for you, and we got many back. So we're just going to, I think we'll spend the whole 40 minutes or so really going over these questions, and I'm sure they'll open up a whole other realm of things for us to chat about. So yeah, thank you. Shall I give you the first one?
Yeah, let's get right into it.
Okay, so how did you first come to recognize that your childhood programming was impacting on your parenting?
Wow, that's a great question.
It is a great question.
Let's see, when did I first realize that my own childhood program was impacting my parenting? I don't know when I first recognized it. It must have been pretty early on for me as a parent. So I'm a dad to an 8-year-old. He's going on 9. So he was born in 2011. And very early on for me, I dived right into parenting. I was reading about attachment parenting. I got Dr. Laura Markham's book, Peaceful Parent, Happy Kid. I just, immersed myself pretty early on. I think I recognized early on that the impact. I think that's kind of a growing thing, sometimes I think a lot of us deny the impact because it's hard to face sometimes, and I think for a lot of us, it sometimes feels hard to feel like we're blaming parents, or we're kind of pointing the finger at our parents, or we're saying, you did this to me, you did that to me. So that's something that I think a lot of us like to avoid. But on the other hand, I think if you're really doing your inner work, that's something that you have to confront at some point too. So I don't have the answer to that specifically, but there was a moment in time when it, sort of all made sense. And but I think it was kind of a growing thing for me.
Yeah, I saw that you did Dr. Shafali's course as well. So was that?
Yeah.
Was that a part of that awakening as well?
I think part of it, I think I was sort of on my way to really diving into my inner work, and I discovered Dr. Shafali. I did her, that was her year-long course called The Year of the Awakened Heart. And that was amazing. That was amazing and transformative, and it definitely did have an impact on me. Yeah.
So were you given good examples of the type of parent that you wanted to be from your own parents?
Gosh, in some ways, yes, and in other ways, no. I think for me, I did a lot of denying of the impact that some of the shaming that I received as a kid. It wasn't very clear to me until my son, until I became a parent myself. It wasn't very clear to me the impact that I would say the shaming and some of the spanking, and I was punished a lot growing. I spent a lot of time in my room, as an early teenager and into those years, just by myself. That was kind of the way I was dealt with. And I'd look back and think, wow, I spent a lot of time as a young kid, early teen into a teen, by myself, left to think about how bad I was. And I look back and I think, wow, that can really have an impact, you know. So I think it really took a lot of years for me to really just accept and kind of confront the fact that it did have an impact. And then when you realize that, what do you do with that? You know, so it's a real journey, this whole inner work.
And I love that you call it that, because we are not into blaming parents at all. I mean, the biggest thing I'm doing when I'm working with people and doing their inner work with them is saying, your parents did the best they could. You know, they operated from their own programming that they got given, and it's kind of just getting passed down. And thank goodness we're evolving towards a better way. So it's just that's kind of, I want to just put that out there, because that's the framework we always come from. It's definitely not about blaming, but it also is about acknowledging what
exactly
sitting in your room, what like for you, and acknowledging the pain that you felt, and not dismissing that as that didn't happen or that wasn't there, because it was there for you as that child. So that's putting that out there. That's how we frame that up. Yeah,
absolutely. And it can be a challenge to have that honesty with yourself, I think. Just that acknowledgement that no, this isn't about blaming my parents and, you know, staying in that mode of you did this to me. At the same time, acknowledging and the impact that it had on you personally.
Yes.
Right.
Exactly. That's very important.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. So from Linda, and this goes on from that previous question, after uncovering childhood programming, how did your relationship with your son change? But you have mentioned that it was pretty much from the beginning for you. So I wonder, do you recognise yourself going back into unconscious behaviour with your son?
Gosh, yeah, I think sometimes, sure. Yes, definitely. I think for the most part, I've been pretty good about remaining in a state of awareness of my own state, my own emotional state as a parent, and my own reactions and reactivity. But I think, the more that I do my own kind of inner work, the more it helps. I think if anything, for me, I've gone through a real period where there was a lot of rawness just in my own healing. I think that was uncomfortable. And I think I did a lot of maybe pushing, I wouldn't say pushing him away, but I was spending less time with him. Maybe there was kind of an avoidance there. But we've had such a strong foundation that I don't think it affected our relationship too badly.
When you say strong foundation, can you explain what that is?
Yeah. So like I said, early on, I really read about, attachment parenting. I understood, I think, about, developing this connection. I was against spanking very early on. I think it took a while for me to kind of get on board with no punishing, because that's really radical, and it's still radical, I think, for most parents. It has worked in our case, and I really think I did a good job of kind of sticking with that. I was really always able to empathize and acknowledge the feelings and kind of validate emotions very well. And I think that helped, that went a long way, I think, with the relationship. One thing I've always also been pretty good at is maintaining a close connection in terms of and this is something, as a parent coach, I recommend to all parents spending at least 10 to 15 minutes a day with your child, with the phone put away, no distractions, and just sort of spending time together, doing a puzzle, playing a game, talking, and without the kind of correction and, noticing things that you think should be fixed in your child. Just 10, like I say, 10 to 15 minutes a day of just connecting. I think that goes such a long way to building that foundation. And then the more that you can do of what I like to call non-coerciveness. So in my bio, I mentioned non-violence. But for me, peaceful parenting is really about a non-coerciveness. I think that's more kind of all-encompassing of no spanking. You don't want to manipulate your child. You want to work together. You want to have a sense of cooperation and getting along and solving problems together. Kind of getting off track here, but I think
no. Yeah. I'm just thinking in the back of my mind of the mums in our group, and I know that they will be wanting like an example. Like, because
okay.
when we talk, they say, but what if this is happening in my life? So say we going bedtimes, or some of the things that we get asked a lot about, bedtimes, screen time, all those kinds of things, and how do you negotiate something like that, or another example that you've got in a
non-sure
way? Yeah.
Well, there's always, as parents, there's always a limit or a boundary that we feel needs to be set, bedtimes, screen time. And I think every parent has to kind of decide for themselves what works for them and their families. At the same time, there are sometimes limits. Sometimes you have to be somewhere on time, or you have to leave somewhere when you don't want to leave. So maybe one example that I like to refer to is a time when we had to leave a park much earlier than I had promised. And my son was about 6 years old at the time, and he was really upset. He did not want to leave. He was looking forward to it as a nice day out. And we had to get back home. I remembered something that I had to get to. And he only got to spend maybe 15 minutes at the playground, which is no time for a 6-year-old. He's just getting started. And so we had to leave. And that was very upsetting for him. And he put up a fuss. He put up a lot of a fight. And by the time we got back to the car, he was still so angry with me. And he actually said the words, he slammed the door shut, and he actually said the words, "I'm so angry with you." And in my mind, I was thinking, well, that's a parenting win right there for a 6-year-old to just express the words, "I'm so angry with you," because I think a lot of kids have trouble just expressing that. But at the same time, he was really upset, and so what I did was instead of taking it personally, or instead of battling with him, which is what I think a lot of parents do, because a lot of times we want to explain or justify or over-explain. I told you, well, you had, or sometimes we will say, well, you had 15 minutes, or you had an hour yesterday, right? Or sometimes we say, quit crying or I'll give you something to cry about, right? A lot of times parents can be very demanding, and sometimes we can be a bit of emotional bullies too in those situations like that. But what for me, what always works is empathizing and validating the feelings. And so that's what I did. I said, "Oh, gosh, I'm so sorry. I know I promised you more time at the park, but I have to get back home." And I just kind of went with that empathizing, and it was amazing to me how quickly his, once he felt understood, once he felt heard, and once he felt those feelings validated, he was able to let it go. He expressed the way he felt. He didn't get battling or pushback from me. Instead, he got all this validation,
Yeah, that's
right,
fantastic. For him to be able to say, I'm angry.
right. And it sounds so easy, sitting here talking about it now, but it can be such a challenge in the moment. I think the key there is, you want to have a lot of just awareness of yourself, what's going on within yourself, what kind of triggered responses and reactions you might be having. And I think it takes a lot of trust sometimes that the empathy does work. If you can stay in that place of empathizing, it really does work,
When I first learned this, it's like magic. And sometimes I find difficulty in explaining to people how if you give it a shot, you may be extremely surprised at the outcome and how simple it can be. As soon as you
right,
feel understood and that their emotions matter. And I get you. I know where you're coming from. Yeah.
Right. And in this case, it was really upsetting. I had promised, and I thought we went into the park, me thinking, he was going to have a ton of time. And then I realized, oh my gosh, we've got to get out of here. I've got to get back. And so, but the difficult part is what? The difficult part in this is what's going on within ourselves. It has nothing to do with the child. It's our own difficulty staying in that place of empathizing, acknowledging feelings. And I think that's the part where conscious parenting comes into play, when if you can learn to kind of observe yourself, if you're finding it really challenging to empathize with whatever limit you've set, or with empathizing with whatever frustration or upset your child is having, if you can start to observe yourself and go, wow, I am really upset. I am really frustrated. I am really feeling very emotionally reactive. And then maybe you can explore that a little deeper and say, why am I so upset? And very often it goes again back to our own childhoods, right?
Yeah.
So how would we have been treated if we had expressed to our own parents, I'm really angry with you. You promised to give me more time at the park. Would we have been put in our place? Right.
Would we have even felt safe to say something like that?
Would we have been even felt safe? Right.
Yeah. Such a good thing to contemplate. Do you have any tips for getting yourself more into a conscious state, especially when your child is emotional?
Yeah, I think this is something that really just takes practice. I think it takes practice, and I think it takes a lot of trust, as I said, that this process does work, that empathizing and acknowledging feelings works. But in that moment, I think it takes the whole practice of giving yourself a pause, maybe taking some deep breaths, maybe, stepping outside and taking a breath of fresh air, because you're training your brain, you're training yourself to take a pause and to essentially tell yourself this isn't an emergency.
Yes.
And just noticing that it's just your own brain's alarm systems that are going off. And if you can sort of take that pause and remind yourself, everyone's safe. I mean, if everyone's not safe, if there's hitting going on, you may need to deal with that. But if it's a case of, defiance or, your child isn't listening to you, or they're doing something that you ask them not to do and it's feeling very triggering for you, or whatever it is, I think that like I say, it just takes practice. Now that practice can be very difficult, and it can take a lot of practice. But I think what happens, at least with me, the more I practiced it and the more I found it to work, the more I was able to trust the process and just sort of, okay, hold on for this ride. You know, we're going through a really difficult moment here, but let's just hold on. Let me put myself in his shoes, right? And I think that's another part, is really putting yourself in your kids' shoes. What are they going through? What is this experience like for them, right?
Yeah. Thank you. That's so valuable.
This one comes from one of our clients who has 5 kids. Now, I know you have a son, but I'm guessing you've worked with parents who've had many kids.
Yeah.
How do you deal with jealousy, rivalries, and cultivating positive relationships between children?
Yeah, wow, that's a great question. I mean, I think it comes down to, again, you know, you want to have that one-on-one time as much as possible, with each child. You know, it's going, you know, more children is going to take more work, I think, and maybe more of that practicing too, of giving yourself a pause, you know, giving yourself that space that you need. And I think self-care, I think, comes into play here too. I think for a lot of parents, you know, our focus can be so much on our parenting. You know, our minds are in this zone of raising our children, of doing it right, of learning the techniques, of, you know, doing our own inner work. Sometimes, you know, we got to step back and do something in our own lives, I think, that feels good to us, whether that's yoga or dancing or art or music, just something in our lives, you know, once a week, getting out and just maybe making that a priority for yourself. So I think there are a lot of components here. No, I have one son. I do not have multiple children. So I can't speak from experience for what that is like. But yeah, I think there are a lot of components here. I think self-care, I think practicing the pause when you're triggered and upset, and doing your own inner work.
Great advice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, this is a big one.
Okay.
This has come from a number of different people in slightly different ways, but basically,
Yeah.
how can we help our partners to wake up without pushing them and causing resistance?
Wow. Yeah. Without pushing and causing resistance. Yeah. I think the main thing comes down to modeling, and being the conscious, peaceful, awakened parent to the best of your own abilities. And then I think it takes a lot of empathizing with them and with their experience and what it's like for them and how triggering things must feel for them, you know. And again, this is a lot easier said than done. I think for a lot of parents, what's going on with our spouses and with our partners can be a lot more triggering than our children can be, you know. But unfortunately, we can't change other people. You just can't.
Another one that says that, Joe.
Yeah. But again, all the power lies within yourself. You know, it comes down to changing yourself. And if if what's going on with your spouse or with your partner is very triggering for you, I think, again, that's another area for you to look into and kind of explore. And, you know, why is it so difficult for me to empathize with what they're going through? Now, of course, if your spouse or partner is being abusive in any way, I think that's maybe a different situation. I think that's when you have to say, look, you're being emotionally abusive or physically abusive or whatever it is. I think that's, you know, I think that's a specific situation for each parent to sort of deal with and figure out, are you really being emotionally abusive, or am I feeling so triggered that, you know, that I'm actually not aware of what's really going on? So I think the main thing here is there is no sort of magic bullet technique or, you know, waving of a magic wand that you can do. So I'm sorry to let anybody down in that regard. I wish I had, you know, kind of the answer to that. But again, going within, doing your own inner work, and modeling these kinds of parenting techniques, I think is your best strategy.
I love that.
And showing that it works.
Yeah. When I first began to open up to this work, and how wonderful is hindsight, but I have 3 children, and I recognise that the huge challenges that I had with one of them was actually a brilliant way for my husband and I to focus on those challenges and the problems with that child rather than looking at our own relationship.
Yeah. Wow.
Ouch.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're good makers of excuses for yourself.
Yes.
If you want to do it that way. Yeah.
I think, you know, you can always turn things into a way of looking at yourself. You know, how did I react to this situation? How could I have reacted differently? Why am I reacting to some situations with more emotion and reactivity than others? You know, if you can have that kind of perspective and attitude, I think that's the place that you want to get to.
Yeah. Can you tell us, across the board of parents you've worked with, what are the most usual complaints?
That's a good one.
Yeah, you know, I have a group myself on Facebook, and I always remember I put out a poll asking parents, what is your number one struggle as a parent? And we had this whole list, you know, of defiance, kids not listening, trouble with bedtime, trouble getting out the door, problems in school, all these kind of things. And then I threw in my own self-regulation as an option at the end. That turned out to be the number one answer in this poll was difficulty with your own self-regulation as a parent.
Yeah. I love how you threw that one in.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
And that's really what it comes down to, I think. For me, I think that there really are 2 parts to this style of parenting. One is the kind of the education and learning about the techniques of peaceful, positive parenting, which has a lot to do with empathy and connection and validating feelings. And then part 2 is the inner work. And I think for me, I didn't quite get that, I think, early on as a parent. I was really all about the strategies and the techniques, and I'm going to learn about how to empathize and how to learn to raise a child without punishing, without spanking. I was very focused on that, I think, very early on. And it took a while for me to really get on board with doing my own inner work. And that turned out to be at least for me, the more difficult part.
Have you had any challenges with people close to you who don't believe in this way?
I don't think I have. For me, I think what happened with me is I started a Facebook page, and I just became kind of outspoken on social media. I think I just sort of made my opinions known, that I was raising my son a certain way, and I think people sort of had an awareness. Okay, he's got his own thing here. I'm not going to get involved and tell him otherwise.
Yeah. So you found your own tribe as opposed to, yeah.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. Love it. Love it. What else?
This is a broad one. What is a conscious dad, and how do you support your child, and what does being conscious with your child look like?
Yeah. Wow. What is a conscious dad? I think a conscious dad is someone who is willing to do the inner work, to work on my own betterment, to be willing to explore what's going on within myself, and to have that general awareness of when I'm feeling reactive, when I'm feeling angry, when I'm feeling upset. Notice this is all about me, the parent, and nothing to do with the child, right? It's not so much about trying to figure out my son, how do I mold him, and how do I manipulate him? How do I get him to listen to me? How do I get him to fill in the blank, right? It's more about what's going on with me. Why am I having difficulty with fill in the blank, whatever it is? Why am I feeling so triggered when I'm being talked back to, or when I'm feeling disrespected, or whatever comes up? I think that's what it means to be a conscious dad and a conscious parent, is to just have that ongoing self-awareness and self-reflection. We're not always aware 100% of the time, but during those times when we're not, when we do sort of slip into unconscious reactivity, to be able to later on have that self-reflection, go, oh wow, yeah, that I really lost it there. And sometimes, when you do lose it, sometimes it may take repairing the relationship with your child, or it may take maybe a commitment to yourself that's something that you want to work on. Maybe it takes a deeper dive, or of kind of figuring out, why is a certain situation so troubling for you? And I think from there, I think there can be, the inner work. Again, this is something that's very easy, I think, to sit and talk about it, but sometimes that inner work can be very emotionally painful. I mean, it can lead you into places that you weren't expecting to go to. And I think that whole healing journey, at least for me, has been, I think, more emotionally painful, I think, than I would have liked. I think I went into it myself, I think, really having this awareness that the more I could improve, and the more I could sort of get myself to a place of feeling healed and feeling whole and alive and on purpose, then the better off my son would be.
Yeah.
And I think I went on into it very early on with sort of this commitment that I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to heal everything that I need to heal. I'm going to do all my inner work. I'm going to dive as deep as it needs to take. And then when I started getting into it, I said, oh my gosh, what have I gotten myself into? This is a lot. I think it's been a journey, I will say, for me. I think getting back to what does it mean to be a conscious dad, to be a conscious parent. I think it is that commitment to doing your own inner work.
And what would your advice be to someone, like we will finish up, although we would like to keep talking for a very long time. I'm sure we could. And maybe we'll do this again sometime.
Sure.
But what would you say to somebody who's kind of in the beginning stages of, hearing about this word, the inner work? And
right.
I want to ask you to explain that, but you've just done a brilliant job of explaining that in what you've just said. So what would you say to them?
Right. Well, I think maybe first I would say congratulations. I think you've taken a step. I think that a lot of parents maybe haven't, for whatever reason, haven't been willing to go to. I do have an article on my website, One Awesome Dad, in which I go over 10, gosh, now I'm forgetting the name of it. It's 10 things to consider when you're starting this peaceful parenting journey. So I think first I would say congratulations. You really are kind of ahead of the pack, I would say. I think one part of this is trusting the process and joining a community, joining a Facebook group, or reaching out to others who are having some measure of success in this, just for support and for guidance, and to sort of feel like you're not alone in this, because it can be difficult and it can be very bumpy. I think the answer to that question really depends on where you are in your journey as a parent too. I think this way of parenting can be easier if you're starting out with a child, with a newborn, as opposed to if you spent the first 7 or 8 years with a lot of authoritarian spanking and punishment. If you're making the switch then and you're suddenly making a shift, I think there are going to be more challenges there. I would say go to my website. I've got an article there. When you guys post this, I'll share the link for that one.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Love that. So,
is there anything else you'd like to share with us before we finish up?
Yeah, I would love to say that that this way of parenting does work. I realize I am more radical than most in that I've actually never punished my son. I've never put him in a timeout. We don't do any kind of consequences, taking things away, threatening to take things away. And I realize that's a very radical, sort of extreme approach. What I like to tell parents is that it has not resulted in my own son becoming the kind of spoiled, entitled, demanding tyrant that I think a lot of parents fear is going to happen if you don't have punishments and, spanking and all this kind of authoritarian discipline. And it isn't that you're completely hands off either and just have a kind of do nothing approach. You actually are very involved in a parent. I might argue that you're more involved as a parent than in other parenting approaches, because you are spending time with connecting and empathizing and doing your own inner work too. So what I would like to say to parents, this does work. It doesn't result in kids becoming spoiled, entitled brats. And congratulations to those of you who are getting into this, because I think it's a better way of parenting. I think it results in kids who are more at ease with themselves, who ultimately are more resilient in life, because they don't grow up with that kind of inner critic, that kind of, at least for me, I grew up with more authoritarian parents, and I think I grew up with a really strong kind of inner critic, you know, self-criticizing, self-shaming, a lot of self-doubt. I think this way of parenting results in less of that, and I think it results in more confident, more emotionally healthy kids.
Wow.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. And yes, we would love to do this again. And we will share this. If you could send us that link to the blog on 10 things when you're starting out.
Yes.
That would be wonderful, be awesome, just like one awesome dad.
Yes.
So viewers can find you on Instagram and Facebook. And is your website One Awesome Dad?
OneAwesomeDad.com. Yes.
Excellent.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks for having me on. I'll be glad to do it again with you sometime.
That would be so good.
We might go live in our Facebook page sometime.
Yes.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for watching.
Yeah. Thanks so much.
Yeah.